Welcome to LEA 550, Leveraging Innovation. This is Lecture 2, and this is also Part 2 of Diagnosing Organizations. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about having a system, having a framework so that you can actually take an organization and figure out, okay, where are some of the problems that you see in this? So here is the open systems model. This is a model that is often used for diagnosing organizations. And as you look at the model, you can see that there are different elements from inputs, outputs, culture, structure, behavior processes, technology, environment. All of these things contribute to a healthy organization. But when you are trying to figure out where are some of the problems as it relates to your organization? This is where then you want to look at this. So let's look, if we can, at some of these terms and what these might mean. So the first term that we're looking at here is inputs, and inputs are basically, and I'm not trying to, by the way, you know, uh, some of these terms I know that you know, and I know that you know what these are, but I think it's important to look at. And these are some of the things like the raw materials, the money that the organization has on hand. Do they have enough money? Um, uh, Basically, you're dealing with all of the resources, the equipment, the information, the knowledge, the legal authorizations uh, that an organization obtains from its environment that contributes to the creation of those outputs. What are the things that's needed for you to be able to accomplish or to create the outcomes that you're looking for? The second term that we're looking at is actually the outputs. If you look at Phil Mickelson, for instance, Phil Mickelson has a brand. Phil Mickelson has lots of sponsors. Phil Mickelson has a lot of investments. There's a lot of things in his portfolio, a lot of things that has to do with Phil Mickelson. But the interesting thing about it, the ultimate outcome that he is looking for are wins on the PGA Tour. In fact, I think right now his goal is to have 50 wins, but that's what he's looking for. So if you were looking at Phil Mickelson, or you were looking at some of the outputs of your particular organization, you got to ask yourself, are we achieving what we're looking for? He's making a lot of money. He still makes every year. He makes a lot of money on the PGA Tour. However, is he achieving the outcome that he is looking for? And in your organization, you may be doing a lot of things right, but are you achieving the outcome that you're looking for? So when you're diagnosing, you look at that. Are you actually hitting your numbers? Are you hitting your goals? Third thing that you can look at then are the goals and strategies. And these are the things, okay, so um, do they have goals? Do they have strategies? Do they know how to use these things? Here you see a goal map. And I want you to notice some things about this goal map, because it starts at the top where that you start with a goal. What are you trying to achieve? Um, what is the actual goal that you have? You remember when we talked about Phil Mickelson, and his goal, is his goal making money? Is his goal? I'm not saying that's not one of the things that's necessary for him. One of the things that he does want, but what's the ultimate goal that he has? What's the ultimate goal that you have? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Well, when you have that, and by the way, you may have more than one goal. You might have multiple goals on different areas. And then from that, you then develop your objectives. So what objectives do you need to, I've got to reach this objective, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, in order, these are the needs that have to be done to achieve the goal that I'm trying to reach. So in Phil Mickelson's case, you have to make cuts on the PGA Tour, and he has to part of the objectives that he has is that he has to make sure that he is somehow entering into fields and entering into and winning a certain amount of winning before he reaches a certain age, because there's a point when he's not going to be able to compete on the PGA anymore. So he has objectives. And then you have a strategy, the methods, and the capabilities to achieve that objective. So what would be his strategy? Well, I'm guessing part of his strategy would be to hit the ball in the fairway, because when he is in the fairway and he has the distance that he has, his chances of hitting the ball close to the pin are infinitely better than when he is in the rough or he's wherever else. I mean, he becomes almost, unbeatable when he is there. So part of the strategy is, how can I get the distance that I need so that I can use the shortest wedges that I can? But not only that, how can I make sure that I'm accurate? And that brings me then to the tactics of the specific activities to implement that strategy. What are some of the specific things that he's going to do to make sure that he does it? Well, he has a short game coach. He has putting coaches. He has psychological coaches. He's got a major coach that helps him with his driving. He makes sure that he has the right caddy that's going to be a help and not a hindrance to him. And then he's going to take these tactics, the things that he's doing. I remember one time he had two drivers in the bag, and there was a reason for that. I don't know all the reasons to it, but he had that. But then you look at your performance measures. Okay, so you're doing these things, but are they working? And I'm going to tell you something. If they're not working, let it go. Now, give it enough time to decide whether it is or not, but if it's not working, let it go. Well, these are some of the things that, as you're looking at your company, you're looking at your organization, you start looking at some of these things. Do they have performance measures? Do they, tactically, are they doing certain things that the way that they do them will help to enable this strategy that will help them to be able to achieve uh, certain things so that they can achieve their goals and finally reach that goal? Is there a breakdown somewhere with all of this? Well, then this brings me then to technology. And when we're looking at technology, some of the things that you would be dealing with there would be tools, machines, maybe techniques for transforming resources into outputs. There's certain ways that you would do that. For instance, we're back to Phil Mickelson again, and that is that maybe it's a new driver, and maybe the loft on that driver, maybe it's the face on that driver, the technology that is involved in that, maybe it's the shaft. There's certain things that even in his shoes, there could be certain things in his grip. And putter, and the fact that he uses an oversized putting grip now, all of these things. And so what is it exactly in your organization? So you could look at the technology. Is it that your technology is antiquated? Is it that your technology isn't quite where it should be? There's one particular organization that I'm thinking of that I do a little bit of consulting with, but that particular organization, one of the things that is hindering them and keeping them from being able to accomplish everything they need to accomplish. It's not only some leadership issues that are there, but also their social media presence and marketing, and the use of that. They could be so much more effective if they had more of a digital footprint in this day and age. Well, that brings me then to the environment. And you'll notice this about the environment. Notice how that there's lots of things that seem to infiltrate into the environment. And I kind of like this little illustration here. It says our sales this quarter don't add up to a hill of beans, which is just as well, since beans cause gas, and that would open up a whole new series of environmental regulations. Well, Anyway, see, this is crazy. But the fact of the matter is there are environmental things that affect our organizations and our operations. Um, they might include your funding sources, suppliers, distributors, unions, customers, clients, regulators, competitors, collaborative partners, markets for the product itself. Maybe it's changed. If you look at, for instance, secondary education, particularly collegiate and university education, I've got to tell you that the environment has changed. And part of the way that it has changed is that we have gone to a digital format. And the reason why that is because that our whole world has gone digital. And so colleges and universities are having to adjust to those environmental factors. So there's lots of things there. And so when you're diagnosing your organization, you might want to look at some of the environmental factors, some of the aspects that are coming in, and how are they affecting the way that you do business. And then there are behavior and processes. And what I'm talking about here is sometimes I'm dealing with bad behavior, patterns of behavior, the way people interact with one another, relationships between groups, relationships between individuals. And this includes cooperation, conflict, coordination, communication, controlling. The fact that I've worked with some that absolutely feel like they've got to be in control of everything. I think it's an insecurity myself, but they just absolutely feel like that they have to have their thumbprint on every decision that is made, and delegation is out the window. We talked about that in previous classes, but that's part of the behavioral issues that's there. Sometimes it has to do with influence, power relationships, supervision. Some people, I remember there was one particular church, and this person came in to pastor this church. And when he didn't last that long at that church. And the reason is because he had worked in a factory. He was a supervisor in a factory, and he wanted to come in and he wanted to pastor a church like you would be a supervisor of a factory. And it just was apples and oranges. It just wasn't going to work, and it didn't work, and it caused some problems with all of that. And there's lots of things that we've talked about that you've dealt with in terms of leadership issues, management, where you can spot it right away where there might be a problem, and it has to do with maybe supervision or leadership. Sometimes it's in decision making. Some people can't make a decision. That's part of the problem. And by the time they get around to wanting to make the decision, I have a person right now, and we were talking about some property that they need to sell. And the interesting thing about the property right now, it's landlocked, so he's got this astronomical price on it. And there's been a couple of times that there's certain people that are around that has some property there that is around it that wanted to make him an absolutely marvelous deal. It'd be too long to go into here in this, but it was a marvelous deal. He's in partnership with somebody else, and the person that he was in partnership with waited too long, and by the time that he got back to him and said, "Yeah, go ahead and do it," it was too late. The deal was lost. Leonard Ravenhill said, "The opportunity of a lifetime must be seized during the lifetime of that opportunity." So sometimes decision making, sometimes problem solving is an issue. Sometimes we talked about it, goal setting can be an issue. Um, Information gathering, self-criticism, evaluation. But one of the biggies that you'll find is working as groups or working in teams. This seems to be one of the biggies where that there is just conflict in that sort of thing. Sometimes you have problems. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But so in behavior, knowing how to behave in certain situations that's not off-putting to others. And so it's behavioral IQ. This is one of the things that we talked about as well in the opening of the program about that triangle. If you remember that, one of the issues that we dealt with that you would be dealing with is not only emotional IQ, but behavioral IQ, knowing how to behave. Well, that brings us then to culture. And culture is vital to the success of your organization, being able to develop the right culture. So when you're thinking about a culture, I'm not talking about cultural diversity, which, by the way, is a factor of this, and it certainly plays a part in it. But I'm really talking about your corporate culture. I'm really talking about your organizational culture. This is talking about how that we have shared norms. There's certain ways that we do things here. There's certain ways that we get along. We've learned to have this. Um, there are certain values that you have. You know, if your value is for instance, at the university level, if your particular value is excellence in education, that's what you're bringing in. And if you were in a particular situation where their value is, you know, hey, mediocrity and in education, that's good enough. You know, then there's going to be some conflict there, and so somebody has to give. Normally, it's the person who is coming into the organization going to have to figure out how they can do that. If they're the ones that's either the mediocrity in education or if they're the excellence in education, somehow it has to fit the corporate culture. Uh, this culture of success is what I'm hoping that you're looking for in all of this. There are certain assumptions that people have, assumptions that that you're going to behave in a certain way. In some places that I've been at, the assumption is that if you're there, you're going to be wearing a suit and tie, especially if you're at a certain level. Normally, when I'm on campus, I wear a suit and tie because of the role that I play. But there are sometimes that in other settings that I'm in where that I would be totally out of place in that particular wardrobe. So that's just one example, but there are certain things. There are certain symbols, certain rituals, certain stories about the organization that people learn, and this is our story. There's certain language that we use. Uh, Understanding the norms of the organization and how things are done, and that's having a cult a organizational culture, and that has to be developed. And it might be that your culture is wrong. I'll give you one in particular, and I hope that someday this has to be changed because it's there. But well, I'll just say it this way, so it does. There are some, for instance, a football team. I'm thinking one in particular. Don't want to mention any names, but I do live in Michigan, so maybe you can figure it out. And you've got a lot of talent on the team. You've got great coaching, and so you ask yourself, what is the problem? Maybe it's the culture of that particular organization that is holding it back, that's causing disunity. So that might be something. And then finally, we get to structure. And you're diagnosing the organization, and it might be that you are not structured for success, but you are structured for ineffectiveness. You are structured in such a way that it is creating barriers. All of these things that we're talking about, maybe it's the organizational structure that you have where you use a top down or a bureaucratic style, and everything is getting funneled to a particular place. It might be that you're looking at the organization and you're seeing that it's siloed, where that everybody is kind of in their own little world, in their own little space, and there's not a whole lot of interaction in between, and it's causing a hindrance in communication, it's causing a hindrance in effectiveness. What I'm showing you in all of this is that there are certain things when you go through this goal map, it helps you to see all the different areas where that there could be a problem. And again, why are we even looking at this? We're diagnosing organizations because it's one thing to have an answer. It's one thing to come up with an innovation, but the reality is you need to make sure that you understand where the problem is, where the actual hindrance is, what's keeping this organization from being what it should be, or what has caused this organization to stagnate, so that you understand what needs to be innovated. Hey, listen, that's our lecture for today, and hopefully next week you'll be able to watch the next one, and we'll look forward to talking with you again about part 3 in diagnosing organizations.